You're listening to Cultivation Elevated, hosted by Michael Williamson and Anders Peterson, where we discuss vertical farming and the future of cannabis and food production.
What's growing on, Anders?
What's growing on, Michael? That's a nice
Yeah,
intro.
yeah. Welcome to season 2 of Cultivation Elevated. I know that you tagged along in season 1 when you could, and we were in the same town, and it was really nice to have a co-host. And so this year, I'm excited to have you on all of the podcasts.
Yeah, man, it's always fun talking with you about this. It's like we're both passionate about it. We both have a lot of time in this industry, and it's happy to be here.
Nice. So you've been traveling quite a bit, and we're always kind of traveling quite a bit, but you've been traveling internationally quite a bit. So I would love to get a recap on Spannabis and kind of your experience there. And then I'd like to talk about some of the new legalization that's happened in Germany and what that means for the rest of the EU and the rest of the world, really.
Yeah, sure. Spannabis has been kind of a bucket list item for me personally for a long time, being in cannabis for over half my life. And so personally, it was amazing to go there and just experience the social club scene in Barcelona before and after the actual Spannabis show. The the culture there is amazing in terms of like the smoking culture and the growing culture. It very much reminds me of the Prop 215 days in California, where there's some unwritten rules, some gray areas, a lot of excitement around legalization and being able to consume safely. It's definitely not legal. So there's you got to be careful, going in and out of the clubs and walking around the street with cannabis on you. Even smoking, it's a lot safer to consume in the clubs. I will say the hash scene out there is amazing. Like we have a great hash scene here in the Bay Area where I live in California, but man, that's a really cool hash scene out there. The Piatella by Uncle's Farm is definitely kind of the highlight a lot of the solventless guys are going for. And I was able to meet him and go to his club and smoke some of his Piatella hash, and it was some of the best hash I've had in years. I mean,
I
it's
know when you sent me that picture and you were like, I think this might be the best hash I've ever had. I was like, okay.
well, rosin has become so commonplace these days, especially when it came out, I think in 2014, 15. People stopped smoking as much full melt bubble hash, and rosin became just easier to consume in terms of being able to dab. And I still smoke full melt, but it's less common these days. Um, Piatella, for those who aren't aware, is a full melt bubble hash solventless product. What makes Piatella unique is the curing process for it. So it's washed, it's first wash, first pull, full melt, dried, and then it's put into a brick and wrapped in a cellophane paper and then vacuum sealed. That brick and cellophane paper is vacuum sealed so that the hash can cold cure with no oxygen. So the oxygen can cause degradation. And the high terpene content of good starting material, which is a requirement for all good solventless, essentially acts as a solvent and helps break down the trichome heads. Because that's always the issue with melt, right? Is with full melt, you have what I call the skin of the grape, the cuticle on the trichome. And
Hmm.
that adds char to the nail when you're dabbing it. And so this technique, Piatella curing technique, helps degrade that cuticle, that cellulose membrane, and it ends up being this almost saucy like texture, and it melts very well. And
With
because there's no
with
heat added to,
no residue, right? On
yeah,
the nail.
well, more than rosin would have, but less than most typical bubble hash. And it just has this amazing flavor profile that like literally I woke up the next morning after taking a dab and I still tasted it in my mouth. Like it coated my entire mouth with so
Nice.
much flavor. And you just don't get that with rosin because even really good rosin is still exposed to 140-degree Fahrenheit temperatures to press it. Bubble hash is not. So it's never been exposed to temperatures greater than what it was grown at in the grow room. So it was just, I mean, and it was definitely a big talk of Spannabis. And when you're out there, it's definitely a bucket list thing to do is go to Uncle's Farm and try Piatella.
How long is that curing process where it's oxygen deprived typically?
But it's a good question. I would say a lot of this technique is not public knowledge. It's definitely guarded, but from what I can discern and from my conversations with folks, it's about 3 weeks.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
what's like a gram go for on the spot market out there?
So anywhere from there's three different tiers. It was 75, 90, and 100 euro. And I would say probably there was a lot of good genetics out there. Apple fritter crossed with the BSE, the best shit ever.
Mm-hmm.
So that was sour best shit ever. So it's the garlic or the apple fritters crossed with sour best shit ever was probably my favorite, most unique profile. Um, and then there was another one called was it garlic onions or French onions? Something onions. That was also
Some kind of GMO cross.
GMO cross. And then he had a headbanger cross that was like
Oh, that's my favorite
it was fire. So
from Karma Genetics.
yeah. So all of that was just a really cool experience to see and just to experience the social clubs. It taught me a lot about kind of where Spain is at. And, I'll admit I felt a little bit of guilt as an American because Americans did not handle themselves well in that scene. Um, I wish we were more respectful of the people who live there and the culture by kind of blowing it up on social media and being very, taking that American consumer mindset and bringing it to Spain. It draws a lot of attention and heat on the people who live there and work in that community every day. And I think for those who may consider going to Spannabis in the future, as respectful as you can be entering and exiting those clubs, consuming on the street, being more discreet. I think legalization has spoiled us a bit here in the States where you got to still have that kind of low key mentality out there. And the more attention you bring to these clubs and that scene, the harder it is for the people who live there and work there in the cannabis industry year round.
Yeah. And
So,
it's bigger than cannabis too. That's just a cultural issue. As someone, as you know, most of my family lives in Italy, and I spent a lot of summers backpacking, and there is just this obnoxious American kind of demeanor that we just have very much cultural differences. And the sad thing is most of the Americans that fall into that category, they're completely aloof. They have not a clue that they're acting, in a way that doesn't really align with the culture that they're in at that time, sadly.
yeah. Yep. But for those who are interested in Spannabis, it's a wonderful week in Barcelona. I fell in love with the city and the people. Everyone was very friendly and nice. Essentially, what happens during this week is Spannabis is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then the week prior, there's a ton of events hosted at these social clubs. So a lot of different hash cups and flower cups and get-togethers and competitions and parties and things. So it's worth the whole week there in Barcelona to spend Monday through Thursday going to these events. And then Spannabis throughout the weekend and all the kind of after parties that follow. So
So I know you were repping your Pipp hoodie that's got a big Pipp billboard sign that people can't see on your back right now.
yeah.
But that being said, it was really interesting to get your feedback of just how many people internationally are aware of Pipp as a brand. But can you highlight some of those conversations for me?
I guess I shouldn't have been so surprised, but I was pretty surprised when, like, oh yeah, on the back of this hoodie, there's a big old Pipp Horticulture logo, and I'm walking around Spannabis or even around some of these social clubs, and people are stopping me and being like, "Yo, do you use Pipp racks?" Or I go, "I work for Pipp," and there was a lot of familiarity with the brand there internationally, which was really cool to experience, just in general.
Pipp, along with you and myself, we're going to be in Europe again. So if anyone is listening to this podcast in Europe or they're planning on attending a couple different events this summer, Anders, you're going to be in Berlin pretty soon.
Yeah, so it's going to be I'll be in there April 15th through like 19th. I think the
I,
show is the 16th and 17th of
yeah,
April.
for ICBC. And
Yep.
if there's any cultivators listening and you want to get some PIP attention, we're always interested in coming to see you in your operation, talking about what's going well, what's not going well, or if you're planning an operation, you can always reach out to us as well. I'll be attending Green Tech in Amsterdam this summer. I'm not sure on the dates off the top of my head, so I won't try and pretend like I know them. But
It's
you'll be able
mid-June.
you'll be able to find us. We're going to be wearing a lot of big Pipp swag, and we'll have some swag to give out as well. So if you see anyone wearing some Pipp gear at any of these events this summer in Europe, feel free to tap us on the shoulder and say what's up. We look forward to talking with you.
Yeah, we'll have a booth at both shows and we'll have a big team there, big presence there. So come by. We're happy to chat.
So, Anders, I know you had a great personal experience in Barcelona. Talk to me a little bit about the event itself, maybe the vendors there, the general kind of energy and vibe, and what people were thinking and talking about.
Yeah, Spannabis. The best way to describe it is it's a blend of MJ BizCon and Emerald Cup, if people have been to those events. So it's partially B2B and B2C as well. So unlike MJ BizCon, people are smoking everywhere. Unlike Emerald Cup, you can't buy actual weed there. You can bring it in and you can consume openly, but there's not vendors selling weed at booths or like hash. But there's a lot of consumers there openly smoking. It was a great vibe, lots of music, huge event. I mean, I don't know the actual attendance number, but it was more crowded than almost any, it was bigger than almost any cannabis event I've ever been to. Tens of thousands of people, shoulder to shoulder, walking around the event. And everyone was very friendly and nice, good vibes everywhere. The exhibitors, there was tons of them. I mean, hundreds of booths, a mix. I would say the main attraction is the seed vendors.
I was going to say they might not be
Like,
selling hash and flower, but they're definitely selling seeds.
I mean, as a genetics nerd myself, and I know you are too, um, I had to have a lot of self-control to not spend my entire paycheck on seeds while I was there. I mean, more seed vendors than I've ever seen in one place. I mean, every breeder you can imagine, a huge selection of genetics. That's what a lot of growers were there for. And then there was quite a few equipment vendors, more and more so in the recent years of Spannabis and in the past. Um, Lots of
You usually
paraphernalia too,
you
a lot of
usually have
glass.
like trying to think. There's usually like multiple breeders in a tent. They'll kind of like collab in the tent, or get under someone's umbrella. I went to Spannabis, it was either 10 or 11 years ago, and I went for seeds, and it was back when we were running Kind Love, and I went on this seed hunt mission, right? And so that was my number one goal. And I got there, and this is, mind you, this is a decade ago. It was all autoflowers. And at the time I was like, oh no, like that doesn't help me in the States for production at this time. And it was back when autoflowers, especially from the United States perspective, had like a kind of a black eye. And they just, weren't what they are today. Today, autoflowers are completely commercially viable in a lot of different solutions. Did you see, were there a lot of autoflowers, or was it a mix of, everything? You
Mix
see
of
fab?
everything.
Yeah.
I mean, a mix of everything. I would say the big talk around that this year was a lot of the American seed breeders coming through and distributing hop latent viroid, or at least that was a concern and a talk.
Sure.
I think there's a need to have breeders be more responsible in hop latent viroid testing to make sure it's not passing through to seed and spreading it internationally, because you know how these plant viruses and viroids go. It's you got to control the spread. I mean, that's why there's agricultural checkpoints all over the world, and then the spread of these botanical goods from country to country, state to state, to prevent spreads of pathogens like this. And so
Hmm.
I definitely think that was an issue, and there's no real way to regulate that other than being personally responsible and ethical
Yeah.
about it. So that was definitely a concern. But it was just so cool to see. I mean, name a breeder, they were there. I
Yeah.
got to
And
see
you
our
bring,
buddy Scott Reach from Rare Dankness. We had a great conversation. You saw the compound guys there, Humboldt Seed Co. I got to meet some really cool new breeders I never met before. Kush Brothers Seeds from Barcelona. They hooked me up with a bunch of genetics, which was really nice of them. So shout out Kush Brothers. Everyone was there.
You bring up a good point that people who are listening to this might not be aware of, because a lot of people who are starting new facilities, specifically in emerging states, are like, oh, I'm starting from seed because I want to have a clean start.
Yeah.
There are some people out there that do not realize that you can spread pathogens and viroids through seed. So if the parental stock is infected and you make offspring or seeds of that, that stuff can translate right through. So really, when it comes to starting clean from seeds, you can pretty much guarantee that you're not going to have any pests But in terms of disease and virus, you're still at risk. So
Hmm.
if you're starting a new facility, and you're starting 100% from seed, knowing your breeder, or having some connection to this, and also testing for these things, because it's not, you can spread stuff through seed. And I think a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of this. And if they are, they've just become aware of this in the last year or two.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a concern.
One thing I remember from
And
Spannabis, and granted, things have elevated quite a bit, but I remember the first time I went, and this was kind of before MJ BizCon was even existed. But it was, our early days of trade shows, and they were kind of dodgy in the States. Like the booths weren't really elaborate. It was just like kind of bare bones. But I remember going to Spannabis, and the booths were beautiful. There was so much custom, everything from woodwork. I mean, there was so much like custom millwork. And I just remember being like, wow, I know that Europeans are more stylish than a lot of Americans in some cases,
absolutely.
especially myself.
I was wearing this and everyone else looked way nicer, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
I felt
But
underdressed.
that being said, I was like, wow, for having like this kind of underground scene here, I mean, the way that they present their businesses and their booths, I mean, it was elegant and beautiful, and yeah, that kind of modern, sleek kind of thing going on. And I remember coming back to going to a trade show in the States and being like, this place is a dump, and these booths are dodgy looking. So I
Yeah.
can only imagine it's only elevated since then. And we have seen, obviously now in the States, the booths are pretty elaborate, but I still think Europe in terms of style has got a one up on us and probably always will.
You nailed it. Yeah, this is the 14th year of Spannabis. The show has grown
It's been in the
exponentially
same
from the
place, I
beginning.
think, right, too?
Same place, yep. Fira Cornella, which is like an event center in out just right outside of Barcelona. And yeah, the booths were beautiful. It was elaborate. I think it's like a 3 to 5 year waiting list to even exhibit there as an
Oh,
exhibitor because
interesting.
it's so sought after. I mean, like I said, it's one of the biggest cannabis events in the world. I mean, MJ BizCon, Spannabis, Cannafest in Czech Republic and Prague. Um, those are some of the bigger events in terms of people attending. But hey, just wait till you go to Green Tech in Amsterdam. Those booths and that event was beautiful as well. Some great
Cool.
stuff there, great companies, but not purely cannabis. It's just a high-tech horticulture show.
Yeah,
But
I remember
yeah,
you said that you had a lot more elevated conversations with growers at that show, so I'm looking forward to that.
yeah, the Dutch are amazing growers. I'll tell you that.
Yep.
But
Cool.
yeah, overall, great experience in Barcelona and at Spannabis. I got to meet some wonderful people, some great growers, and yeah, excited to come back.
Nice. All right. Well, we hope to see everyone else there next year. Don't be a stranger if you ever see Anders and I out. We love to chat cannabis 8 days a week. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening.